So at this point, I'll introduce Andy Chan, the Vice President for Career Development and Innovation, who will take it from here. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Minta. And hello to everyone out there. We're really glad that you could join us this evening. We're talking to the parents of the class of 2021. It's hard to believe, I'm sure for many of you, that your children are seniors this year. And in the middle of a crazy pandemic, like what in the world is going on? Well, we have learned a lot and we are doing a lot, trying to make the most of this really challenging situation and doing it the way great Demon Deacons would do it. So I'm here, I'm very thankful to actually be able to have members of my team that I will briefly introduce. And then we have a couple of great students who Heidi will actually have a conversation with to let you know what the student experience is like. So on my team, one is Stuart Meese. Stuart actually oversees all of our employer relations activities, as well as our operations, our data, our technology, everything in our infrastructure that helps us work really smoothly. And we'll talk to Stuart about the market. Mike Crespi is our leader on the undergraduate business side, overseeing all of our career education and coaching. And in particular, he has a lot of expertise in the finance, consulting, marketing areas, which are three of the most popular areas for Wake Forest students. And Mike and I have worked together for a long time here at Wake Forest. And then Heidi Robinson, I know many of you know, she oversees all of our career education coaching in the college side of the house, 4,800 students each year, really in the OPCD. And then also has a huge team of coaches she oversees, as well as she is the associate faculty member associate professor who actually is on the education faculty, who has designed and developed our college to career courses that we want to make sure that if your student hasn't had a chance, that they still can do that during their spring semester of this coming last year at Wake Forest. So let's start with Stuart and talk a little bit about the market. Everyone's wondering, Stuart, what is the state of the current job market, specifically for seniors? And how would you say it's different than what you've seen in other years?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As you can imagine, the market is quite different than it was last year at this time. However, there are opportunities for students, and it's not much different than when it was in 2009 when we were doing this. And what I mean by that is there are jobs, and plenty of them, if you're willing to do one of two things. And that is, if you're willing to maybe humble yourself a bit and think about a job that may not be exactly your dream job. So let's say, perfect example of that is marketing versus sales. Or two, if you're willing to acquire the skill sets in demand, and think of software development, programming. Those were jobs that were in high demand during the Great Recession in '09, and you're seeing them similar here in the COVID recession in 2020. So that is something that we see. Jobs are less than they were naturally last year at this time, but due to our sourcing, there actually are higher. There are more opportunities available for students. Now, again, it may not be in the prime locations, prime industries, and so forth, but there are enough opportunities to go around, and our students are actually responding to it based off of the significant increase in number of applications our students are doing in the handshake system compared to last year.
Stuart, you mentioned the idea of sourcing jobs. Can you talk a little bit about what the kinds of things your team does to source jobs that aren't just the ones that have always come to Wake Forest, or ones that maybe are just posting jobs to Handshake? You do something more than that. Describe that.
Yeah, that's a multi-pronged approach. We created something called the Strategic Employer Service Model, where we looked at a lot of data and a lot of inputs to identify, here are our tier 1, 2, and 3 companies that are out there. These are companies that have hired more in the past. There's relationships there, et cetera. And all of those accounts have an account manager assigned to them. So they're servicing them. These are ongoing long-term history with it. Second thing is what I would call natural opportunities that are coming in by being part of the Handshake network. Companies have the ability to post jobs multi-school. They can select all, or they can select regional ones, et cetera. The sourcing, proactive sourcing we do, It's a little bit more of a science to it. We look at jobs and internships that students have been applying to, and based off of their interest in some of the natural opportunities we have, we'll go out and source. It may be competitors, it may be similar industry regions, etc. And we've sourced quite a few jobs. I don't have the most recent numbers, but about 2,000 since July. And what we're seeing is those jobs and internships are being applied to twice as often as those that are natural. So I think we're hitting the right opportunities that students want based off the applications. But there's many other things we do. There, as you can imagine, we get a lot of referrals, alums. One thing that we do for engineering, as we're getting that up and going, we've actually gotten lists from the NC State Engineering Fair as we're building up ours to let them know about our students as well, although not as many as state. We're slowly creeping up, and we're trying to get more employers there. We do normal year treks where we take students to different regions around different industries, especially some of those where companies and organizations aren't necessarily going to set foot on campus. So think of like your government, nonprofits, arts, things of that nature. And we're going to be pivoting to more virtual treks as well. And all of this activity, one of the things that Andy wants us to take a look at, many of you are familiar with NPS, Net Promoter Score. And so we do the same metric with our employers, and our NPS is 74 this past year. So we keep a tight eye on that as well. So we're doing a lot of different things to try and provide as many opportunities as possible for the students.
One of the things that Stuart and I talk about is with NPS. It took me a while to get educated, understanding that NPS 74 isn't 74 out of 100. It's 74, looking at the difference between promoters and not promoters or detractors, and that 74 is equivalent to like Ritz-Carlton or JetBlue or Zappos. So some of the best companies in their industry sector. So that's great that we know our employers really like recruiting at Wake, not only just the services we provide, but like interacting with our students. You mentioned some good areas where students might like look into that that are sort of more hot today. And what are those things that maybe aren't so hot? And I bring this up mainly because oftentimes these are the things that our students say this is what they want. Mm-hmm. And maybe you could just name those, and then maybe a little of the advice you would give to a student on how to think about like reframing. If I can't get what I wanted, what do I do?
Right. So start with marketing, because I was looking at this, and even with our sourcing, marketing opportunities are down about 6% year over year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but what's happening is you're getting almost 5 times as many people applying for jobs, and that's just not at Wake. I'm sure it's probably similar to that at other schools. And so there's just not as many opportunities in certain spaces. And certainly networking is one way to do it, working with us, differentiating yourself and so forth. But you have to realize just the labor market in general is you've got experienced people that have been laid off, and maybe they're going to be interested in those particular roles as well as relate. So it's kind of a food chain type of thing. But many times you'll see folks wanting to get involved in, say, the arts or Capitol Hill or sports or fashion or entertainment. Everybody wants to be in those roles. And for the most part, not always, but for the most part, you don't need to have a differentiating skill set. You just have to have desire, you've got to have connections, and you got to have the grit and resiliency to really want it and compete. And those companies typically are not coming on campus because they don't have to, because they can get more applications to those people that want it the most, and especially in this particular environment. So volunteering is always one way to get into it. I talk about platform jobs where maybe you can volunteer, have a flexible schedule, but then you're doing something outside of that field to pay the bills depending on your financial situation. So you really have to compete for those jobs because they're not revenue producing roles like a sales or computer science or consulting or some of these. Other industries out there that you may want to be considering that are high, of course, healthcare, government consulting, you're seeing opportunities there. Certainly any type of logistics and in the Amazons of the world, but also in mortgage with all the lower interest rates. There's a run on those opportunities. Some of the folks we talk to say that there's a lot of opportunities there as well. So that gives you just a quick overview of some of the advice that we give folks in those fields.
That's great, Stuart. Yeah, one of the things that I like is this idea of a platform job, as you describe it, is something where you're in the market, you're learning, you're getting skills, and you're getting income. And that enables you to be able to do the networking or volunteering or doing other education that could be online in forms that are not traditional school, that give you the skill, confidence, and network to be able to then work your way into that job when the opportunities arise. And that you can feel a little bit like, why couldn't I get that right away? But I think everyone's realizing we can't get exactly what we want, especially in this market environment. So I do think thinking like that seems to be really helpful, and people are getting more accustomed to that idea. All right, Stuart, thank you very much. I'm going to switch over to Mike and ask Mike a little bit about the undergraduate business school experience and how you feel like the students this year might experience recruiting and how it differs from last year.
Thank you, Andy. I want to welcome to everyone that's here, and thanks for coming. We hope you find this helpful. It's a great question. What I think was really interesting is we've been reaching out to students, and it's been rewarding to hear about their summer experiences, because in most cases they were positive, but not in the way that we think traditionally happened. Their employers were incredibly supportive. They may not have had a lot of work, but they taught them a lot. And a lot of students had their internships canceled, but then pivoted and found something that might be shorter that really added to them. This professional development is something that I've talked to students about as a skill they get usually 2 to 3 years into their job, not before they graduate, and how to use that. So interestingly, the career fair has resulted in interviews. And, it was kind of like, what was going to happen here? Preparations with the students, financial services. Stuart talked to these consulting, sales and business development, analytics seem to be the places that have traction. The employer relations team sends out weekly summaries. We have this pathways opportunity where we send out the communications to students too, and the summaries of job postings are being well received by the students. They're looking at them, they're applying to them. When I start looking at the majors a little bit, finance has not typically been a just-in-time business, and it's starting to go that way, especially for those that may have not gotten an offer from their summer internship. BEM majors, business enterprise management, will be mixed. Yes, there's a lot of marketing, but there's a lot of consulting and business development. Last week we held Wake Up Work, which was all about this past summer. And I attended 3 sessions, heard from 15 plus students who shared their experience, and was so excited about their enthusiasm and positivity. Stuart mentioned grit, which I didn't have, but grit win, and the hard work they do at Wake Forest equals grit. So it's going to be really good. But our biggest challenge right now, I think, is being patient, working hard, staying engaged, and what are the alternative paths to that dream job. Don't give up the dream, but work in parallel so you can step into that space.
That's great. That's great, Mike. Yeah, one of the things I think we talk about oftentimes is thinking about your career. It's more like playing chess, where you actually have to make multiple moves over time, sometimes lateral, sometimes backwards, to get to the outcome you want to get to, as opposed to thinking I can just sort of straight shoot it right away. And I think most people in our lives know that that's the case. When we're faced with moments like this, I think students are realizing this is all I'm being given, so I actually have to be really creative in that. And so I like that, how you were saying, even in this difficult time, there's a lot of learnings that are coming from it, that's for sure. One other thing actually I'm curious about when you actually think about students who from summer, so a lot of them, almost all of them, worked virtually, right? And
Yes.
then it seems like quite a few of them are actually getting offers to go back for full time. Can you talk a bit about like what the differences are between like the types of companies who give offers for full time and those who actually don't? Because obviously there's a whole set of students who don't get offers for full time, and they feel like it was disappointing, which in fact, given the kind of company, it's actually totally reasonable, but how do we help distinguish that?
You know, that's a great question because, and they'll say, my friend has a job offer. And I say, what do you want to do? I want to be in marketing. Well, what are they doing? Well, they're going to be in investment banking. Okay, well, the two don't match. And so we've just started our survey of the students, and we've gotten about a 20% response rate to see what happened. And what we found out, and I'll explain this a little bit deeper, is the business enterprise management majors. They're the ones that are doing the marketing. They're doing maybe some sales, some consulting. They're doing things potentially with smaller companies, entrepreneurial companies, not the big corporations. And about 20% of them reported, and about 42% got offers, which is pretty good. It's actually pretty good, because what we find in finance, the same thing, about 20% reporting, they're looking at about 75% got offers. And remember, I'm dealing only with the 20% set right now, so this isn't everybody. Mathematical business is about a 50% offer rate, and that's the analytics side. And our accounting majors are going to graduate school, so we're looking at them in a different way for their internship for the winter. But getting back to what we see is the big corporations that build a bench are the ones that can make the offers, because they know they can project what their needs are for next year. It's the medium-sized companies, the smaller companies that can't do it. I will say this, though, the consulting firms and the financial firms are leading the way when it comes to these offers.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely bigger, more established, have recruiting sort of pipelines that they think about, and the reality is that they're a very small percentage of all the employment opportunity in the whole market. But we tend to over-rotate on that because they tend to be the ones that spend the most amount of money and time recruiting on campuses. So students can perceive those are the only opportunities. But every year in, year out, I always have to remind people that, you know, we've had 97% employment within 6 months of graduation for many, many years. And even for this class of 2020 right now, we are actually more or less at the same level at this point in time we were last year. Obviously, we have a few more months to go, and we're spending a lot of time with those students to try to help them, you know, those recent grads, to help them close it out strong. We're very optimistic because we're actually talking about these same topics with those students and those are recent alums, so that they can actually be able to be successful as they finish out the year. All right, I'm going to switch over now to Heidi. And Heidi, one of the things that I'd love for you to share is, and some of the questions that are coming in are about students who are in the college. They're in English, they're in chemistry, you know, they're in majors that maybe don't quickly align to business, or maybe align to fields that aren't necessarily traditional recruiters. What do we do to help them, and what maybe even do you say parents can do to help those types of students?
I absolutely love this question. So one of the things that I think about for our students who are in some of those different fields is that they just are in those majors. They may not actually connect what they've been doing in their major to some of the outcomes that their peers who have gone before them are actually doing. Now, there are a couple of ways for them to explore that and have that kind of inspiration. One is to go into LinkedIn, and you can actually be under our alumni section, our alumni analytics, you can go in and sort by major to just go ahead and get some ideas about where do chemistry majors go. So that's one piece where there's an exploration piece and connection to the kinds of opportunities that may or may not align with their interests, but begin to go ahead and get them thinking about their opportunities. I would say next is to go ahead and have those students begin to consider the skills that they have gained through their major that also are very valuable in the market. I'll go back to chemistry. There are a host of different skills that are embedded within that particular major that actually align with all sorts of different industries and job functions. And students often go ahead and only think very narrowly about those particular majors that don't necessarily have a direct tie into a particular field. Networking is one of the most important things that we can do for those students. Having them come into the OPCD and letting us help them connect that major to the opportunity is critical. And then I would also say that particularly for students who are interested in the arts, we are still doing events where we are taking students to the market. Now this time we're doing it virtually. Stuart referenced this a little bit, but we've already got a beautiful marketing trek where previous years we would have gone to New York. Well, now we can bring all sorts of different alumni here to campus with Zoom, and they actually get a very wide array of different kinds of ideas that they can consider. The last piece I would say is that students often dismiss the idea or are unaware that the network for Wake Forest alumni is mighty. It is strong and vibrant and, in fact, hungry to help. And so I think one of the things that we can do for students who are in majors where they don't necessarily see a straight path is begin to connect them with people who are also in that particular major and in something that student may not yet have thought about in a way that connects their skills, their gifts, and the experiences that they're having.
Yep. Great. I know that I think our students will talk a little about the value of networking. One of the things that I think of is that oftentimes we confuse that by going and doing networking, that will like lead quickly to a job. And oftentimes the value, most important value is to understand from people who have been there before you, what has been their pathway and what do they like and don't like about what they do, and is this even a good fit, and how do I talk about myself in a way that makes sense so that when I actually do interview, I'm more prepared, and maybe even eventually maybe have a friend who might even help you get a recommendation or at least a referral into a company or to another contact. It takes time. Back to playing chess, it's one of those where, like Mike said, persistence, patience, sort of grit, sticking to it, like things will pay off, but you have to really look at it as more like a marathon, as you talked about with me today, than any other type of race. And so I think that's important I think parents can help their student have more of that longer term, learn as you go, build it as it comes, it grows, and all of a sudden there's an inflection point where things get really better, but it takes a while for that to bubble to that point, as opposed to do these 3 things and it'll be all done. I mean, we always sort of think it's like that way, even in a really good job market, but it's even harder in this particular market for sure. About your course, like a student could take your course now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So all of our courses are half semester. So in fact, Options in the World of Work begins in October.
Yeah.
So it will start October 16th and go until the end of the school year. And then in the spring, particularly for seniors, the course that I would recommend is $299. Where we sort of go from self-understanding, career options, and then all of the personal branding, interviewing, and skills. Those are 2 that I think seniors get a lot of traction from.
Yep.
And we see them begin to grow and their confidence changes.
Yep.
And the last thing I would add about the majors, Andy, that sort of where students may or may not see alignment, is students don't sometimes know that we have actually been very transparent about where different majors actually land. And so if you will go to our website, if your student will go to our website under Explore Majors, there is a tab that says, I keep coming back to chemistry, where do chemistry majors land? And it's a spreadsheet that will actually help students understand a little bit about the careers associated with the major they've chosen.
Great. Let's see. I think the only last question I have for you, and I know that you can then go talk to the students and sort of introduce them and talk about their stories, is if I had a child who was either feeling like discouraged about the state of the market, or just even frustrated of all the job search they've done before, or maybe even in previous interactions with our office or career coach, it didn't go so well, like, what would you say to that parent to try to encourage that student to give it a try again? Like, what are the kind of things that you would say the best way to get a student started?
Well, the first thing I would say is that every student has a fit with a different coach, right? So I would encourage any student, if they've come in and they didn't feel like that actually was the kind of either approach that worked for them or the kinds of things they wanted to talk about, go back and try another. And that is actually a fabulous way to go ahead and get started. I would say secondarily, the discouragement is real. Students are facing a whole host of changes. They're getting a lot of messages from culture. And so one of the things that truly they need is encouragement. And I think a lot of students feel pressure right now that is in some ways helping them sort of get stuck. So I would encourage them to come to our office. We are, right now, it's never been easier to come and be with one of our coaches. In fact, we are seeing incredible numbers. Our volume is something that we have not seen year over year. And part of that is because it's never been easier for a student to go ahead and get that kind of support. So I would say that one of the best things is to go ahead and find another voice who can begin to show you what those resources are and begin to point you for the kinds of opportunities that are genuinely being found by Stuart's team daily.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Well, let me pass it over to you so you can actually have a conversation with our great students.
Oh, I'm so excited for everybody to meet these folks. So Eric and Madison, thank you for joining us. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about both of them. Eric we tried to think about students who are really doing all the right things, who may have had some kinds of different experiences as they've come through Wake Forest, but they have arrived here at their senior year and embraced this kind of momentum and found a different strategies that are working for them. Eric and Madison both have slightly different stories. What I would say for you, Eric is a first-generation student at Wake Forest and is creating this very much a pattern of success that he has been pursuing. Madison is someone who has had a few pivots as she has come through Wake Forest, and as she entered her senior year, has really begun to use, again, a strategy and an energy, like Eric, to pursue things that matter to them. So I'd love to go ahead and maybe I'll start, Eric, with you. And just to go ahead and ask you of just a few questions, starting with saying, now, you really wanted to shape your story as you came into your senior year. Some of your work experience have been, I would say, somewhat traditional. You had an internship, but you had some campus things that you did too. How did you go ahead and begin to tell your story as you are applying as a senior?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I'm very happy to be here. I think an important way for me to be able to do that is to not only leverage the internship that I was able to have this past summer, but also my previous experiences with Wake internships, as well as experiences I've had with professors and their research opportunities. I think that is what helped make me tell a holistic story of who I am and what my narrative is as I apply to these positions.
So one of the things, Eric, that I think about for you, and well, I'd love for you to tell people how your time is used while you're at Wake Forest. You're one of the busiest students I know, right? So I'm gonna let you explain that yourself. And then I would love for you to explain how you stay motivated and kind of what you're doing in this job process, because you're kind of an exemplar with this whole application piece.
Yeah, all right, so kind of like a background on my usual schedule is this semester is kind of light for me in terms of I'm a full-time student. I have 2 jobs on campus, and I do some work on the weekends as a farmhand, just as a way to be able to finance my college experience. But the way that I'm able to fit my application process and being able to network is really finding time within the day in terms of finding those opportunities within lunchtime or late nights or early mornings, and being able to communicate with people and send those applications, because there really is no time. This is Wake Forest. It lives up to its name, I'll tell you that. But yeah, just making those opportunities even when there is no time.
And let's talk about the applications, because you have actually taken you have a strategy about how you're applying, the volume that you're doing, and the kinds of other things, not just applying, that are helping to move you along in this path in your senior year.
Yeah, so I think a very important aspect of that for me is being able to not only apply to a variety of opportunities, but being able to partner up with OPCD and make those appointments to make sure that I'm applying to the correct jobs and that I'm able to leverage the experiences I've had to connect with the employers that are looking for those particular experiences. So not only just applying everywhere, but applying to the places that make sense and the places that I could see myself being for 2 to 3 years after. Yeah.
Go ahead and tell them how many applications you put in, and then Madison, I'm coming to you.
I ballpark around like 50, I think.
Yep. And how many events? I was trying to remember from your handshake account.
I'm sorry, I have no idea. Maybe 10, I think.
How many?
Maybe 10.
Yeah, I think that's at least. I'm not remembering, but I'll go back and check for you. But it's been a number of different things. So I'm going to come back to you too in just a minute, Eric. But Madison, I want to pivot over to you and let you tell your story a little bit, because I guess I did say pivot over to you, because pivot's part of your story and sort of where you find yourself right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Heidi. So I've talked to Heidi about my story quite a lot. I am a chemistry major. I know we've talked a lot about chemistry today. And when I entered Wake Forest, I always planned on being a chemistry major, but I really thought I wanted to go into research and do research chemistry or maybe biotech, somewhere along those lines. I took about 2 chemistry labs and realized that I love chemistry, but chemistry lab wasn't it for me. It was a little bit too independent. There wasn't quite enough newness to it for me, and it just didn't line up with my personal values about what I wanted out of a career. So at that point, I pivoted in my career path and I decided to explore medicine, which is something that I'd never thought to explore before. And I did a really amazing summer internship program with a private surgical facility. And since then, I've been tracking on surgery for pre-med. And I was planning on going straight into medical school. And then I pivoted again on some advice from people that are much smarter than me at Wake Forest. And they said, you know what, Madison, going straight into medical school, that's really hard. You might want to think about taking a year, take a gap year, work, do a post-grad program, do a post-bac. And I said, post-bac? Let's do that. And so my plan was to do maybe a master's program, get some more education in, and then go into medical school. You guessed it, I pivoted again. And I decided that I would much rather do actual professional experience in between my school experiences. I think that it adds something. And I think for me, it is more valuable for me because one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to medicine is the service aspect. So I'm spending my time currently applying to postgraduate programs that allow me to either do clinical research or service in low-income communities and countries, or I'm applying also to jobs that are clinical opportunities, medical opportunities, and a couple of lab research opportunities, because to go back to something Stuart said at the very beginning, you kind of have to be willing to look at some things that are a little bit out of what you want to do. And I know that I very carefully selected these lab opportunities to be more in line with my values and what I think might help me on my track to medical school.
So let me just be sure I'm hearing you correctly. You're now applying to some things that are actually
Yes, I am. I'm applying to jobs. Yes.
So when you started the summer, where were you when you were thinking, gosh, I might go ahead and apply for jobs rather than actually get a little bit more school? Where were you and sort of what helped you along the way?
Well, this is a shameless plug. Professor Robinson's class helped me so much. If a senior can make it happen in the spring, I would so recommend to everyone I know to take her class, because I entered her class over the summer thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a senior taking this class. This is embarrassing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even know how to apply to a job. It wasn't like that. I was telling Professor Robinson earlier today that for some reason, cover letters always scared me. I never knew how to write one. And so anytime there was a job posting that required a cover letter, it was nope, not going to do that one. So after her class, just one example out of many, many gems that came out of her class, I have a strategy and a plan, and I have expanded my toolkit, so to speak. And from the beginning of the summer to now, I feel more prepared and more knowledgeable, and most importantly, more confident. I think that that is the biggest thing that the OPCD and Professor Robinson have given to me is confidence, because you need that.
I love hearing confidence. I hear it in both of you. I'm so glad that you have found some of those things in our office that have helped you grow and see. Tweet 140 characters. If you were speaking to a parent right now to give them advice on how to help their child either gain motivation or things a parent could do, what would you say?
Quick tweet. I think that a little bit of support can go a long way. For example, my dad is not super vocal or emotional. But every now and then, if he knows I have a big test, he'll text me late when he knows that I'm up, midnight, 1, and he'll just say, I know you're working and I'm proud of you. And it's just like those little things throughout the day. And I would add to that, this is way over 140 characters, that just the, can I do anything, goes so long. Because even if your student says, no, I got this going on or this going on, just the, is there anything I can do to help question can go so far. If it's a phone call, if it's a care package, if it's a picture of your dog when your kid is having a bad day, that can do more than you know.
Thank you, Madison. And I'm going to kick Eric, the question's coming to you. If a student is stuck or needs motivation, or what are some things a parent could do, or what advice would you want parents to hear from you as a senior?
In my experience, I've found it really helpful to know that there are people that are helping me through the process as I go through it myself. So what that looks like is I've had people who have helped guide me through this process help me figure out how to brag about myself, because I know that's a big thing for seniors, especially people who are going into the job market. They're trying to be able to learn how to brag about themselves. This is way over 140 characters. Being able to know that not only am I bragging about myself, but know that my parents are also working towards actively get my experience out there as well. And who knows, maybe that might trigger something within your networks.
And I think about the work you've done with your coach, Cheryl Hicks, which has been very meaningful for you as well. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Madison. We're so glad that you are here. And Andy, I'm going to turn things back over to you. Thank you both.
Eric, Madison, thank you so much for just sharing your experiences and those great words of advice to sort of give parents hope that actually things are going to work out, and little nudges and positive affirmations that they can give even when, it can feel a little bit like it's pretty difficult out there. For those of you who are out there listening, one of the honestly strangely beautiful things about Zoom is that all these people can ask all questions, and if I have a panel that's big enough, people like Stuart and Mike can answer all these questions in the background while we're actually having a conversation. So if you actually want to look at some of the questions that are on there, it's worth actually taking a look. I think one thing that sort of stood out that I think would be really helpful, I'll ask Stuart maybe to talk about a little bit, is there's some people who actually are really interested in like STEM related careers. They're interested in either in research roles or healthcare or pharma and things like that. And maybe Stuart, you can talk briefly about what's the kind of activity you see on the organization side trying to recruit students like that, and then what's the kind of activity you see on the student side in terms of their intensity of applying for those types of things. Can you talk a little bit about that, Stuart?
Yeah, sorry, I was going through all these questions here. So with pharma, we've done virtual treks in the past. We've relied heavily on our employer base. We actually partner with other schools for an event at Chapel Hill in normal years that has a lot of these pharma companies in the Raleigh area come and participate. Some of the bigger companies do go to certain schools that may specialize in these programs. I recall, I forget the exact name, but it was basically a pharmaceutical writer, something to, there's a specialty program that's out there specifically in that space. So we're learning through all of this, and certainly these companies are having to bring on more individuals during this particular time. So when we go and source, there's opportunities there as well. You don't have as many coming to Wake Forest. I mean, perfectly honest with you, you're not going to have as many as maybe at other schools that may have a stronger focus on that. But there are certainly students that get opportunities in those broader spaces from that. We see that from First Destination Survey. And if the student is interested in that, I encourage them to go and talk to a coach, whether it's they're in the college, Heidi's staff, that she has a dedicated person who will help that folks. And then Mike can help in the business school as well.
There's another question. Stuart, I'll let you answer it first, and then Heidi, maybe you can a little bit. When you think about sort of engineering, and we have a new class of students who actually are in the engineering program, can you talk a bit about the employer interest in sort of students who have a general engineering degree, how you sort of see that, and how you think employers see that? And then Heidi, maybe you can talk a little bit about how we support those students.
Sure. I mean, engineering is hot right now. I think one of the advantages we've seen from Wake Forest is it's very rare to have a liberal arts school with an engineering focus, but we do have that. That is very unique. The other thing that has been very exciting to employers is the mix of diversity. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there is a much larger percentage of female and underrepresented minorities that are in this program compared to an NC State or Penn State that's out there. One of the things that we struggle with is you're going to have small numbers right now, and a lot of the majors are general or they have specific concentration. So there's not a lot of critical mass. So that makes it difficult for the recruiter, where they can go to Penn State and talk to 700 industrial and system engineers. We may have 7 that want to be in that are graduating at any one time. So there are some challenges there, and we work with the program lead on it. There's a representative both from the coaching side, Brian Mendenhall, and then Lori Sykes on the employee relations team that are working on that as part of our broader career affinity group.
Great. Heidi?
Love to. I think one of the great advantages of our engineering students is that they have this liberal arts education that goes alongside their engineering education. What that means is that they are interested in solving a very wide range of problems that they might see. So one of the things that's interesting is that they are interested clearly in engineering kinds of careers. They're also interested in consulting. They're interested in finance. And so I would say one of the things that I really appreciate about that is that Brian Mendenhall, who works with engineering, works very closely in making sure that they have tailored support for those students. He has helped them really understand what they want to do with that engineering degree and then help them create a plan to get there. The other great thing about what Brian does is he can track and tell you which engineering students have completed their Handshake profile, have a resume in Handshake. He can tell you how many have LinkedIn profiles, and that just doesn't happen very many places. So I would say that's one of the sort of gems for the OPCD, in the sense that that kind of tracking and knowing where our kids are so we can support them is really special and different.
Thanks, Heidi. Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
What?
Yeah.
Can I add one other thing? In some of the pre-questions, we didn't get an opportunity to answer this, and we're going to make it some of the Q&A available, I believe. But the question was, should my son or daughter, class of 21, consider grad school versus going into the labor market? And we are beginning to see evidence that the number of students thinking about that, applying to that, is increasing. We're seeing in our own graduate and professional school day program, our attendance from other schools participating to get to our students is very, very high compared to previous years. And I think it just depends on which program that you're going to, what you want to do long term. Programs like accounting, of course, you want master's teaching, and you want to tie that to the industry. If it's something more general, you really have to, I think, to look at what is the demand for it. That if you go and spend a year, 2 years, however long it is to get this degree, are you going to be in a better position a year or 2 years from now as you are now? And then what is that return on investment of the cost of the program, but also what type of income would you have been making those 1 or 2 years? I think, unfortunately, sometimes students use it as a crutch. I remember those days when I was 22, 23, thinking about that. I kind of wanted to stay in a college town for a while, but I think you really have to look at what is the market demand for that, for a graduate program of that specification that you're going into.
Great. Thanks, Stuart, for answering that. Mike, one question that is being asked is a bit about just international students. What's the market look like for them, and how do they, this OPT, is it helpful, not helpful? You know, how's it changed given this environment right now?
So great question. I think that the key with international students is understand your visa status, your CPT options, and your OPT options. So OPT being the visa status you work under after graduation. I think what's really important about this is there are a lot of majors at Wake Forest that are STEM certified, which means you get the 1 year of OPT plus 2 more added on. The key that I work with international students a lot, and there is about remaining positive, but exploring companies that may be from their home country doing business in the United States, or U.S. companies doing business in their country, and look at language skills as being a differentiator. But at the same time, working on their English skills so that they can present to the clients here as well. It's difficult. It's political. I think it's one of those things that students understand. But often what we're beginning to find is using their visa status and understanding where they're authorized to work is really helpful in the process. But again, it's just like the rest of it. Keep a parallel path, keep a U.S. strategy and a home country strategy. And I've found that that's where they remain positive in their search.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for providing that perspective. We keep getting lots of different questions on the Q&A. They're coming fast and furious. I think we've been able to get to most of them. And it does seem like, you know, a lot of the parents are actually like, you know, trying to think through, like, how do I give my child advice on what to do next? And maybe that is probably a good way for us to wrap up. If you were to sort of think about our conversation, knowing for you, the students, knowing your classmates, like, what would you say if you could say, you know, 1 or 2 things that you would recommend for your classmate to do now, you know, almost like no matter what they're studying, what would be those things on their mind? And then I'll ask the same thing of my team too. So Madison, how about I start with you? What would be 1 or 2 things that if you were to tell a classmate, like, do this, or make sure, you know, don't forget that, either an action item or maybe a way of thinking? What comes to mind?
So on the to-do list, I would say make an appointment with the OPCD. I know that's maybe like not groundbreaking advice for this panel, but to be honest, it's just good advice. And I would say if your child is a senior and hasn't met with the OPCD, I have friends that met with the OPCD for the first time their senior year last week. Some of my best friends. So I would say if you're like me, you might have to swallow your pride and go and ask for help, but it will make a difference in the long run. And I would say that just put your pride behind you, I think, and go and talk to people that know more about it than you and are a little bit smarter than you, and you will come out so much wiser and better off for it.
That's great. Thanks, Madison. How about you, Eric?
I think an important thing about the OPCD is that it is a center specifically made and engineered to pair Wake students with jobs. And I think it'd be a terrible resource to waste if you don't use that. I'm also an RA in our first year apartments. And that's one of the first things I tell my residents is to make sure you visit the OPCD. It's never too early or too late to visit the OPCD. always going to go OPCD.
Nice. I like that. It's never too early or too late. That's really good. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the longer it goes, it can feel a little bit like I should have this figured out. Or if I don't, a lot of people will sometimes say like, until I get it figured out, then I'll go. But actually that can go on for a long time, well beyond your time in college. So I do think it's worth that. So that's great. How about you, Mike? What would you say? One or two things that are important for students to do or know or think right now?
So I would say really positivity and enthusiasm to embrace the process. It's something they're going to be doing the rest of their lives. So take ownership. That's really invaluable. And as parents, encourage them to support their efforts. There's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. Let's try to minimize the extremes so they keep coming to us to engage in the process. It was well said by Madison. Come, we're here where you are to get you going. Take advantage of the resources available.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Heidi, how about you?
I would say that for Wake Forest students, one of the most difficult things is ambiguity. And students, Madison, Eric, nod if I'm right, but color-coded planners, yes. Syllabus, checking boxes. And so to have this ambiguity is extraordinarily difficult. And so I think reminding students that it's not easy for everyone, but they have control in how they take action. And so going ahead, and when they feel anxious about not knowing what may be coming, that they can go ahead and take action, and it mitigates that feeling of anxiousness or uncomfortable feelings that go with not knowing exactly what is next. They do have some control. And then of course I have to say, come see us. Come see us.
All right. Thanks, Heidi. And how about you, Stuart? One last thought.
Yeah, I would say two things. You really need to understand the market. The market is very critical, supply and demand. They're looking for folks with specific skill sets, and I would apply to more opportunities than maybe you thought that you're really interested in. Cast a very wide net, and you got to do it now, not in April, because I'd say probably 2/3 or more of college recruiting is done in the fall. And once they get enough applicants, and they're going to get a lot, and they're going to get a lot of quality applicants, that time to fill, time to hire ratio that they look at is going to dwindle. So you got to get in the game now. You can't wait until March and April.
Great. We really try to make it as simple as we can for students. And, one is we want them to be engaged in this. First simple way is make sure you've got a handshake profile. If we have that information, we can actually push information to you. We can tell what your interests are. We can actually start talking to you based on what you want, what you need. We don't have it. We don't have any idea. You're actually really alone. So I would say we need to have you be engaged. And then the second thing is we want you to be ready. So as you can imagine, a lot of times what happens is people will apply for lots of jobs, but if their materials aren't great, they don't have the confidence that Madison and Eric show. Eric actually can even say, like, I can brag on myself and not be embarrassed or feel like that's not a good thing to say. It's a good thing to say. Like, we want you to feel like you can brag on yourself. If your child doesn't feel that way, then they're not ready. And it's horrible to actually apply for jobs when you're not ready, because you could go apply, and you're just not competitive on paper or making a 30-second pitch. And especially if you actually get to an interview. And so these are all things that we can help a student diagnose and work through, make sure they're really ready. And then you have to apply, but you have to apply to the right kinds of things. If you're applying to only the same things over and over and over again, it's not a good fit, or the market's too competitive, those are the main reasons. Or you just don't apply enough, you're too picky, like all those different things. We actually need to help you see through that. And then actually you'll find success. It seems so simple, but it's a journey, and it's one where when you have students like Madison and Eric where they've gone through and just going to keep on staying the course, and you have honestly cheerleaders like Stuart or Heidi or Mike or me or Brad or Minta or Anna Marie. Like, we love our students. We want to help you, and we can only help you if we know you. So urge your child to do one little thing. Just one little thing, take one step forward and stay positive. Never get down. Don't let the market sort of make you think it's worse than it is, because actually it's better than you might think for a college student, and it's better than you might think, especially for a college student from Wake Forest, because Wake Forest students shine in the marketplace. they are so good. Employers love them so much, and they will do great. We just have to help them get there. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. I hope you found this super helpful, and please, please, please know that we're for your student. We'll be there, honestly, till the very last day of graduation and even beyond if your child needs it. So don't wear that, and we really appreciate you being here with us.
Andy, thank you so much for those comments and the content of the program. I think everybody realizes how complex but simple maybe the process may seem. And I think the number one factor, and echo Madison and Eric, call the OPCD office and for your students to make an appointment. I think everybody gets kind of panicked and scared as it gets toward the end of that senior year, but this is an incredible resource that the school has put together with incredibly talented people that want to help. And as Andy mentioned, we're here not only for the seniors, but we have a program that works with our alumni. So it extends beyond the 4 years of students. So number one, tell your students to make those appointments and go see folks. I also wanted to echo with everybody that in a week's time, maybe a little bit less, on the family news page, we're going to put this recording or this program as a recording up for everybody to look at. There'll be a kind of a frequently asked question piece to that too, where you can look and see some of the questions that were shared and answers that went back and forth with everybody. But we want to thank you. Again, this is a resource we want your students to take advantage of, and something we're very proud to be able to offer in Wake Forest. So I know from the Family Engagement Office, Anna Marie, who helps coordinate these things, Minta, who welcomed everybody. We want to thank you folks for joining us tonight, and we'll be in touch. Let us know if you have questions. Bye now.